Chief Examiner Zyrell Bax stood at the observation window of the Galactic Testing Center, watching the latest batch of test takers file into their designated chambers. His forearms crossed in their traditional gesture of contemplation, while his secondary eyes tracked the movement of various species below. The massive testing facility stretched for kilometers in every direction, a testament to the Galactic Council's dedication to finding intelligent life worthy of joining their ranks. Another day, another failure, Zyrell muttered to himself, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of disappointment. The massive screens surrounding his office displayed real-time statistics of current and past test results. Not a single species had managed to pass the universal aptitude test since its inception. Not the telepathic mindweavers of Proxima 7, not the quantum computing silicoids of the Andromeda Arm, and certainly not the hive mind collective of the Zeta Reticuli system. The testing center itself was a marvel of engineering. Constructed from living metal that adapted to each species' environmental needs, it could accommodate anything from methane-breathing giants to microscopic silicon-based life forms. The walls pulsed with bioorganic light, creating an atmosphere that should have been conducive to peak cognitive performance. Yet somehow, every species managed to fail spectacularly. Chief Examiner, the facility's AI, announced, its voice modulated to sound appropriately respectful. The Council requests your presence for the quarterly review. Zyrell's skin shifted from its usual professional blue to a slightly annoyed purple. Tell them I'll be there in exactly 7 minutes and 33 seconds. He had learned long ago that being precise with time measurements impressed the Council members, even if he actually arrived whenever he managed to finish his morning stimulant drink. The walk to the Council chamber gave him time to review the latest statistics on his neural interface. Species 47,832 had managed to solve the first phase of the test, but became physically ill during the second phase when they realized the solution required them to think in 5 dimensions. Species 47,833 had simply sat in the testing chamber meditating for 6 hours before declaring the test itself was an illusion. And species 47,834 had attempted to eat the testing equipment, claiming their cultural practices required the consumption of knowledge in its physical form. The Council chamber doors parted with a soft whoosh, revealing the semicircle of 12 beings who governed the testing process. Each Council member represented a different category of successful species from the time before the Great Collapse, when passing the test had actually been possible. Chief Examiner Bax Council member Thaxon Prime spoke, their crystalline form refracting light in what Zyrell knew to be a gesture of mild irritation. Your latest report suggests we have tested another 3,000 species this quarter, with 0 successes. That is correct. Honored Council, Zyrell replied, his skin maintaining its professional hue through years of practice control. Though I would like to point out that species 47,832 did manage to get further than any we've seen in the past century. Before becoming physically ill, Council member Axon 7 added, their plasma form bubbling with what passed for amusement in their species. Yes, well, Zyrell cleared his third throat. The 5-dimensional reasoning portion of the test has always been particularly challenging. The test was designed to be challenging, Council member Thaxon Prime stated, not impossible. Yet here we are, 10,000 years later, without a single new species joining our ranks. Perhaps, Chief Examiner, the problem lies not with the test takers, but with the administration. Zyrell felt his skin threatening to shift to the deep red of embarrassment. I assure you, honored Council, my team follows every protocol precisely. We have even implemented the suggested improvements from last century's review. Speaking of improvements, Council member Nexus 4 interjected, their quantum matrix flickering with interest. We have received notice of a new species requesting testing rights. They call themselves humans. The chamber filled with the various sounds of Council members expressing their skepticism. Zyrell pulled up the preliminary data on his neural interface and almost let his professional composure slip. They're from a Class 3 planet, and they achieve space travel without destroying themselves. Indeed, Thaxon Prime confirmed. Their application was unusual. They included what they called memes and something they referred to as dad jokes along with their formal request. Surely we're not considering, Zyrell began, but was cut off by a chorus of Council members signaling agreement. We are not merely considering, Chief Examiner Thaxon Prime declared. "We are scheduling. Prepare your facility. The humans begin testing next week." Zyrell's skin finally betrayed him, shifting to a mottled pattern of disbelief and resignation. As he left the council chamber, he made a mental note to stock up on stimulant drinks. Something told him he was going to need them. The day the human representative arrived at the Galactic Testing Center, Zyrell Bax witnessed 3 separate species violate their own religious protocols by cursing in public. Nora Kipp, the human in question, had walked straight into a plasma field door, laughed it off, then proceeded to ask if anyone wanted to share something called a sandwich. "You understand this is the most prestigious testing facility in the known universe?" Zyrell asked, watching as Nora attempted to figure out which of his 4 hands to shake. She eventually settled on shaking them all, one after another. "Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I brought enough sandwiches for everyone. Never take a test on an empty stomach. That's what my mom always said." Nora pulled out a container that somehow managed to violate at least 7 different spatial laws. "Anyone want turkey? I also have peanut butter and jelly, but I should warn you about potential allergies." The gathered alien species, representatives from 50 different worlds currently undergoing testing, watched in horror as Nora began setting up what she called a snack station. The quantum beings of Sector 6 actually flickered out of existence for a few moments in sheer disbelief. Representative Kip Zyrell tried again, his skin cycling through various shades of professional concern. The Universal Aptitude Test determines whether species are ready to join the galactic community. It measures cognitive ability, dimensional awareness, and species cohesion. It is not a social gathering. "Well, not with that attitude, it isn't," Nora replied cheerfully, offering a sandwich to a passing methane breather who looked like they might faint from the shock. "Besides, I've read all about the test's history. 10,000 years without a pass? Sounds to me like everyone's been taking it way too seriously." From his observation post, Council Member Thaxon Prime's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been either amusement or intense disapproval. "Chief Examiner Bax, please remind the human representative about proper testing protocols." "Already done that," Sir Zyrell reported, watching as Nora somehow convinced a group of silicon-based life forms to try something called potato chips. 3 times, she responded by teaching the Hive Mind Collective how to play something called patty cake. The testing center's AI, which had been silent since Nora's arrival, suddenly spoke up. "Chief Examiner, I feel compelled to report that the human's approach to social interaction has resulted in a 47% increase in positive neural patterns among waiting test takers." "That's impossible," Zyrell muttered, but the numbers on his neural interface confirmed it. The traditionally tense pre-test atmosphere had shifted into something almost pleasant. Even the psychic amobus, known for their perpetual pessimism, were participating in what appeared to be a game of rock, paper, scissors. "Impossible seems to be their specialty," Council Member Axon 7 observed, their plasma form swirling with curiosity. "Did you know their species achieved faster than light travel by accidentally spilling coffee on their quantum equations?" Zyrell felt a headache forming in all 3 of his brains. Surely we're not seriously considering them as candidates. They barely understand 4-dimensional space. "Hey, Mr. Bax," Nora called out, somehow managing to pronounce his name correctly on the first try, something no other species had managed in his 300 years as Chief Examiner. "I was thinking, since everyone's so nervous about the test, maybe we could start with a group study session. I brought flashcards." The horrified gasps from the traditionally stoic council members were almost worth the complete breakdown of testing protocols. Almost. "Flashcards," Zyrell repeated, his skin turning an unprecedented shade of confused beige. "Yeah, and I know we're supposed to work individually, but I had this crazy thought. What if we learned more by working together? I mean, that's kind of the point of a galactic community, right?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Council Member Thaxon Prime's crystalline form making what could only be described as a suppressed laugh. "Chief Examiner Bax, please proceed with the testing schedule. And perhaps we should observe this human's methods more closely." As Zyrell watched Nora organize what she called a pre-test meditation session, complete with something called yoga poses modified for various alien physiologies, He couldn't shake the feeling that the next few days would either revolutionize the testing process or end in spectacular disaster. Knowing humans, he suspected it might somehow be both. The universal aptitude test consisted of 3 chambers, each designed to push the limits of cognitive processing and problem-solving abilities. Zyrell Bax stood in his observation room, watching as the first round of testing began. His data screens displayed real-time feeds from each chamber, while his neural interface processed the incoming results. Beginning Test Chamber 1, the facility AI announced. Candidates will now face the paradigm puzzle. In the first chamber, representatives from 12 different species faced what appeared to be a simple cube floating in the center of the room. The quantum beings immediately attempted to phase through it, only to find themselves back at their starting position. The hive mind collective tried to surround it with their distributed consciousness, resulting in temporary confusion as the cube seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Fascinating approach from the silicon-based life forms council member Thaxon Prime noted. As the crystalline beings attempted to resonate with the cube's frequency, they managed to create a beautiful harmonic pattern before their cognitive functions temporarily shut down from the feedback loop. Meanwhile, Nora Kip walked around the cube, hands in her pockets, whistling something she called a show tune. Hey, has anyone tried just asking it what it wants? The other species stopped their attempts to stare at her in bewilderment. Zyrell's skin shifted to a pattern that indicated both confusion and interest. Representative Kip, the cube is not sentient. It's a test of multidimensional problem-solving capabilities. Well, sure, but everything's got a story. Right? Nora reached out and gently tapped the cube. So what's yours, little guy? To everyone's shock, including Zyrell's, the cube responded by projecting a series of complex equations into the air. The methane breathers immediately began calculating probable solutions, while the psychic amoebas attempted to divine the cube's true nature through extrasensory perception. Please observe proper testing protocols, Zyrell announced through the chamber's communication system. Each species must work independently too. Oh. It's like one of those puzzle boxes my grandma used to have. Nora interrupted, completely ignoring the protocol announcement. You know, the ones where you have to find the right sequence to make it open? Except this one's using math instead of buttons. That's pretty cool. The quantum beings flickered in annoyance. The mathematical complexity of these equations would require several standard cycles to solve. The human clearly doesn't grasp the magnitude of. But what if we're not supposed to solve the equations? Nora asked, still circling the cube. I mean, look at how they're arranged. It's not just math, it's a pattern, like a dance. Zyrell watched in astonishment as Nora began moving her hands through the projected equations, treating them like choreography rather than calculations. The cube responded by shifting its projections, following her movements. Is she teaching the test cube to dance? Council member Axon 7 asked, their plasma form bubbling with confusion. That's not possible, Zyrell muttered. But his instruments confirmed that the cube was indeed responding to Nora's movements in ways it had never responded to any species' attempts at interaction. In Chamber 2, the situation became even more unusual. The challenge involved processing multiple timelines simultaneously, a task that had caused several species to experience temporal nausea. The hive mind collective had already withdrawn, claiming that temporal fluctuations were disrupting their shared consciousness. Nora's approach? She pulled out a notebook and began drawing what she called a flow chart, complete with doodles in the margins. Representative Kip Zyrell called out, his professional tone strained. The temporal visualization matrix requires direct neural engagement. Sure, but sometimes it helps to see things on paper first, Nora replied, adding what appeared to be a small drawing of a cat to her diagram. Besides, these timeline branches remind me of a TV show I used to watch. They had this whole multiverse thing going on, really helps you visualize the possibilities. The facility AI chimed in, Chief Examiner, the human's crude physical representation of the temporal matrix is actually creating a stable framework for timeline visualization. Several other species are showing improved comprehension by observing her method. That's not how the test works, Zyrell protested, but he couldn't deny the data. The silicon-based life forms had already begun creating their own physical representations of the time streams, while the quantum beings were engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion about something called science fiction. Chamber 3 presented the greatest challenge, a problem that required simultaneously understanding all possible solutions to recognize why none of them would work. It was designed to test a species' ability to transcend their own problem-solving limitations. Previous attempts had included the methane breathers trying to calculate every possible solution until their processors overheated, and the psychic amoebas attempting to glimpse the answer through precognition, only to give themselves collective migraines. Nora sat cross-legged in front of the problem matrix, eating another sandwich. You know what this reminds me of? That old saying about the definition of insanity being doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That is not relevant to the test parameters, Zyrell stated, though he noticed his skin had developed spots of interested turquoise. But what if it is? Look, everyone's trying to solve the problem, right? But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is recognizing that some problems aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be solved, they're meant to be understood. The testing chamber fell silent as Nora stood up, brushing sandwich crumbs from her clothes. The puzzle isn't about finding the right answer. It's about understanding why we're looking for answers in the first place. Zyrell's neural interface began displaying unprecedented data patterns. The testing matrix was responding to Nora's philosophical approach in ways he'd never seen before. Impossible, Council Member Thaxon Prime whispered, their crystalline form vibrating with intensity. She's not trying to solve it. She's trying to understand it. Chief Examiner the Facility AI announced, I feel compelled to point out that the human's approach has revealed aspects of the test's underlying structure that were previously undetected. She appears to be redefining the parameters of success. Zyrell watched as Nora began explaining her thoughts to the other species, complete with hand gestures and what she called interpretive dance. To his complete astonishment, the other test takers were beginning to show signs of comprehension rather than their usual frustration. You know what this whole test reminds me of? Nora asked, addressing the room at large. It's like trying to win at Monopoly. Sometimes the real victory isn't about winning, it's about having fun and learning from the experience. This is a serious cognitive assessment, not a game, Zyrell reminded her, though his skin had betrayed him by developing patterns of amused acceptance. Everything's a game if you look at it right, Nora replied with a wink. And sometimes the best way to win is to change how you think about winning. As Zyrell compiled his observation reports, he couldn't help but notice that for the first time in 10,000 years, the testing chambers were filled with something new: laughter. Perhaps, he thought, watching Nora teach the quantum beings something called the hokey pokey, that was a kind of victory in itself. By the third day of testing, the Galactic Testing Center had descended into what Zyrell Bax could only describe as organized chaos. His morning report to the council started with an unprecedented statement: the humans have started a study group. A what? Council Member Thaxon Prime's crystalline form crackled with concern. A study group, Zyrell repeated, his skin cycling through various shades of professional distress. Representative Kip has somehow convinced 6 different species to collaborate on test solutions. They are calling it Brain Blast Buddies. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of protests. The quantum beings flickered so rapidly they nearly phased out of reality. The methane breathers released clouds of anxious gas, forcing the chamber's ventilation system into emergency mode. This is an outrage, Council Member Axon 7 declared, their plasma form boiling with indignation. The universal aptitude test must be taken individually. It has been this way for 10,000 years. Zyrell brought up the latest testing data on his neural interface. I understand your concern, Honored Council. However, I feel compelled to report that the collaborative group has achieved a 300% improvement in problem-solving efficiency. That's not the point, Thaxon Prime interrupted. The point is. A notification chimed through the chamber. The facility AI spoke with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Pardon the interruption, but Representative Kip has just ordered what she calls a pizza party for all test participants. Zyrell's skin turned a previously undocumented shade of exasperated beige. She what? A pizza party, the AI repeated. She claims it will help boost morale. she has also requested permission to install something called a karaoke machine in the relaxation area. In testing chamber 1, Nora had somehow convinced the silicon-based life forms to approach the dimensional puzzles through what she called interpretive theater. They were currently performing a dramatic representation of quantum entanglement, complete with improvised costumes made from testing room materials. "This is unprecedented," Zyrell muttered, watching as the hive mind collective joined in, providing background music through synchronized humming. The testing protocols clearly state. "Hey, Mr. Bax," Nora called out, waving all the way from Chamber 1. "You should join us. The quantum beings are going to perform a synchronized dance number about parallel dimensions." The psychic amobas, traditionally known for their stoic approach to everything, had formed what they called a cheering section. They were generating telepathic waves of encouragement that had several of the more sensitive species floating in a state of euphoric understanding. Representative Kip Zyrell tried to maintain his professional composure. The test is designed to measure individual species' capability for advanced cognitive processing. It is not meant to be entertaining. "But why can't it be both?" Nora asked, helping a methane breather adjust their position in the quantum choreography. "I mean, think about it. When do people usually have their best ideas? When they're stressed out and afraid of failing, or when they're relaxed and having fun?" Zyrell's neural interface began displaying an unusual pattern of data. The testing chambers were recording unprecedented levels of cognitive activity across all participating species. Even more surprisingly, the activity patterns showed signs of synchronization between different species' problem-solving approaches. Chief Examiner, the facility AI, interrupted his thoughts. "I feel compelled to inform you that the collaborative approach has resulted in the discovery of 17 previously unidentified testing parameters. The human's methodology appears to be revealing aspects of the test that have remained hidden for millennia." "That's impossible," Zyrell stated, but his skin had begun showing patterns of reluctant appreciation. The test was designed to be comprehensible only through individual cognitive advancement. "Exactly," Nora exclaimed, somehow hearing him despite being in a sealed chamber. "But what if individual advancement doesn't have to mean working alone? What if the real test is learning how to combine different ways of thinking?" The council members watched in various states of shock as the testing chambers transformed into something that looked more like a multi-species talent show. The quantum beings had created a light display that perfectly illustrated six-dimensional space, while the silicon-based life forms provided a crystalline soundtrack that somehow made complex mathematical concepts audible. "This is completely against protocol," Council member Thaxon Prime declared, though their crystalline form was vibrating in what appeared to be rhythm with the silicon-based being's mathematical symphony. "Protocol," Nora laughed, the sound echoing through the testing center's communication system. "Sometimes the best protocols are the ones we haven't written yet. Look at what everyone can do when they stop being afraid of getting it wrong." And Zyrell had to look. He watched as species that had never successfully communicated began sharing their unique perspectives on reality. The hive mind collective was teaching the psychic amobas about distributed consciousness processing, while the methane breathers shared their gaseous computational methods with fascinated quantum beings. Chief Examiner, the facility AI, announced, "Test completion rates have increased by 750%. More importantly, understanding of fundamental concepts has improved across all participating species." "But they're not following the rules," Zyrell protested weakly, even as his skin displayed patterns of growing enlightenment. "Maybe the rules need updating," Nora suggested, now conducting what she called a multi-dimensional orchestra of different species problem-solving methods. After all, isn't the point of joining a galactic community about learning from each other? The testing center's data screens were displaying results that defied 10,000 years of established patterns. Species that had never progressed beyond basic dimensional understanding were now grasping concepts that should have been beyond their comprehension. "It's not just about solving the puzzles," Nora explained, as the quantum beings performed what they called a quantum superposition ballet. "It's about understanding that everyone sees things differently, and that's not a weakness. It's the greatest strength we could have." Zyrell's neural interface was practically overloading with new data patterns. This goes against everything we thought we knew about cognitive development and species advancement. "Maybe that's exactly what we needed," Nora replied, her voice carrying a mixture of joy and wisdom that made even the most skeptical council members pause. Sometimes the best way forward isn't about following the path. Sometimes it's about realizing we can dance along it instead. As the testing chambers filled with the combined knowledge and creativity of multiple species working together, Zyrell realized that humanity hadn't just broken the protocols. They had shown why the protocols needed breaking. His skin, finally giving up any pretense of professional distance, displayed what could only be described as a pattern of revolutionary understanding. The emergency council meeting was called just as the testing center's AI reported its 57th consecutive system upgrade. Zyrell Bax stood before the assembled council members, his skin displaying a complex pattern that somehow combined professional concern with barely contained excitement. "Honored council," he began, "I believe we need to discuss what Representative Kip has actually accomplished here." "You mean besides turning our prestigious testing facility into what she calls a learning party?" Council member Thaxon Prime asked, though their crystalline form sparkled with what looked suspiciously like amusement. "Exactly," Zyrell replied, activating the chamber's holographic display. "Look at these results. The test was designed to be impossible to pass, correct?" The council chamber fell silent. After a moment, Council Member Axon 7's plasma form rippled thoughtfully. The test was designed to reveal when a species was ready to transcend their own limitations. And in 10,000 years, no species has managed to do that, Zyrell continued. Until now. But not in the way we expected. The holographic display showed footage from the testing chambers. Nora was in the center, surrounded by representatives from every participating species, all engaged in what she had dubbed the Great Galactic Brain Bounce. "The silicon-based beings have achieved quantum resonance through interpretive dance," Zyrell reported. "The hive mind collective has learned to process individual perspectives while maintaining their group consciousness. The methane breathers are now capable of expressing complex theoretical concepts through what Representative Kip calls improvisational jazz." "But none of this follows testing protocols," Council Member Thaxon Prime protested, though their crystalline structure was vibrating in harmony with the recorded music. "That," Zyrell said, his skin shifting to a shade of profound realization, "is exactly the point. The test was designed to identify species capable of transcending their limitations. We assumed that meant solving impossible problems through conventional methods." The facility AI interrupted, its voice carrying an unmistakable note of satisfaction. "If I may, Chief Examiner, Representative Kip's methods have resulted in a 1,200% increase in cross-species understanding. The testing center's cognitive enhancement protocols have been permanently improved through what she calls the power of friendship." "The power of friendship?" several council members asked simultaneously, creating an interesting harmonic effect in the chamber. "Watch this," Zyrell said, advancing the holographic playback. The footage showed Nora teaching the quantum beings to play duck, duck, goose as a way to understand probability waves. The psychic amobas had formed a cheerleading pyramid, their telepathic encouragement causing several pieces of testing equipment to float in synchronized patterns. The test was never about finding the right answers, Nora's voice came through the recording. It was about learning to ask better questions. And the best questions come when we stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be better together. Council Member Axon 7's plasma form brightened considerably. "Are you suggesting that the human has passed the test by proving it was unnecessarily restrictive?" "Better than that," Zyrell replied, his skin now showing patterns of pure joy. "She's shown us that we've been testing for the wrong things. We wanted to find species capable of transcending their limitations. But we never considered that the greatest transcendence might come through cooperation rather than competition." The holographic display showed multiple species working together, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. The quantum beings were teaching others about probability manipulation while learning about linear thinking. The hive mind collective was exploring individual creativity while helping others understand group dynamics. The testing center's primary directive has always been to identify species ready to join the galactic community, Zyrell continued. "We assumed that meant finding those who could overcome impossible challenges alone. Representative Kip has demonstrated something far more valuable: the ability to bring diverse minds together in ways that make everyone stronger." But the protocol's council member Thaxon Prime began weakly. Were written 10,000 years ago, Zyrell finished. Perhaps it's time they evolved, just as we hope our tested species will evolve. The facility AI chimed in again. Chief Examiner Representative Kip has just organized what she calls a graduation ceremony. She insists everyone wear what she calls party hats. The council chamber erupted in a mixture of protests and curiosity. Through the chaos, Nora's voice came through the communication system. Hey everyone! The quantum beings have figured out how to make the party hats exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the silicon-based life forms have composed a graduation march that actually solves differential equations when you dance to it. Zyrell watched as his carefully maintained testing center transformed into what Nora called the first annual Galactic Understanding Gala. Species that had once competed against each other were now celebrating their shared achievements. The methane breathers had created a gas-based light show that illustrated complex mathematical concepts, while the psychic amobas provided a telepathic backdrop of pure joy. Chief Examiner Council member Axon 7 spoke, their plasma form glowing with resolution. I believe we need to update the testing protocols. Already done, Nora called out cheerfully. I wrote some suggestions while we were having our quantum physics poetry slam yesterday. Don't worry, I made sure to include lots of charts. And stickers. Everything's better with stickers. As Zyrell watched the celebration unfold, his skin settled into a new pattern, one that had never been seen before in his species. It was a pattern that somehow combined professional satisfaction with pure, unbridled happiness. You know what the best part is? Nora asked, appearing beside him somehow despite the chamber's security protocols. Everyone passed. Not because they solved all the problems, but because they learned how to work together to understand them better. The council members, watching their prestigious testing center turn into what could only be described as a multidimensional party, finally surrendered to the inevitable. Council member Thaxon Prime's crystalline form began generating celebratory light patterns, while Council member Axon 7's plasma form started teaching younger species about energy state dancing. I suppose, Zyrell said, accepting a party hat that somehow existed in 6 dimensions simultaneously, this means we'll need to completely redesign our testing procedures. Nah, Nora replied with a grin. We just need to remember that the best tests aren't about finding out who's smartest. They're about discovering how everyone can be smart together. As the Galactic Testing Center filled with the sounds of multiple species learning, laughing, and growing together, Zyrell realized that humanity hadn't just passed the test. They had transformed it into something better. His final report, submitted as the celebration reached its peak, contained only one line. Test status evolved beyond original parameters. Recommend immediate implementation of the KIP protocol for collaborative advancement, also known as Operation Party with a Purpose. 6 months after what became known as the Great Testing Revolution, Zyrell Bax stood in his office at the newly renamed Galactic Collaborative Learning Center, watching as another group of species arrived for their first day of assessment. His skin, once locked in perpetual professional blue, now freely displayed his emotions, currently showing a pattern of contentment with spots of anticipation. Chief Educational Facilitator Bax, the facility AI, announced, using his new title. The humans have arrived with their traditional welcome packages. Let me guess, Zyrell said, already smiling. More sandwiches. Affirmative. Though this time they have included what they call cosmic cupcakes. According to Representative Kip, they are regular cupcakes with edible glitter. The testing center, now featuring comfortable lounges, group discussion areas, and what Nora insisted on calling thinking pods, had become the most sought-after destination in the galaxy. Species that had once feared the notorious universal aptitude test now eagerly applied for what they called the ultimate understanding adventure. You know, Nora said, materializing beside him with her usual disregard for spatial physics, I just realized something funny. You guys spent 10,000 years looking for species who could think outside the box, but you kept them all in separate boxes while testing them. Zyrell's skin rippled with amused acknowledgement. The irony has not escaped the Council's notice, though I must say, some of them are still adapting to the new approach. Council member Thaxon Prime actually participated in last week's quantum karaoke night. Really? Please tell me someone recorded that. The hive mind collective created a perfect memory impression. They play it every time they need a mood boost. The facility AI interrupted their conversation. Pardon me, but the silicon-based beings have just arrived. They are requesting permission to perform their traditional mathematical sonata, now with added choreography. Around them, the center hummed with activity. The psychic Amobus had established a permanent telepathic encouragement field that made everyone feel slightly more confident. The quantum beings had finally mastered the art of existing in multiple states while maintaining a single consciousness, though they still occasionally split into parallel versions during particularly exciting card games. You know what the funny thing is, Nora asked, watching as a group of methane breathers taught newly arrived species their famous gas-based interpretive problem-solving dance. Everyone thought humans were the least qualified species to take the test. We barely understand 4 dimensions, we can't read minds, and our quantum processing capabilities are basically non-existent. And yet Zyrell replied, his skin showing patterns of wisdom gained, you understood something that all of us, with our advanced capabilities, had missed. The true test was never about individual achievement. Nope, it was about learning how to learn from each other. Speaking of which, have you tried the new coffee machine the quantum beings installed? It can brew coffee in multiple probability states simultaneously, though sometimes you end up with tea instead, which they insist is just coffee from an alternate timeline. The Council had recently published their annual report on galactic advancement. For the first time in recorded history, every participating species showed significant improvement in cognitive capabilities, problem-solving skills, and most importantly, what Nora had dubbed the Joy of Discovery Index. Chief Educational Facilitator the AI announced, the new group is ready to begin their first collaborative session. Representative Kip has prepared what she calls an icebreaker activity involving quantum mechanics and something called the hokey pokey. Zyrell's skin displayed a pattern that combined professional pride with pure delight. You know, when humans first arrived, I thought you would either destroy the testing center or drive me into early molecular dissolution. And instead you taught us that the best way to advance isn't by proving who's superior, but by showing how everyone can be extraordinary together. His skin shifted to a thoughtful pattern. Though I still don't understand why every breakthrough has to be celebrated with what you call a dance party. Because, my multi-armed friend. Nora replied with a grin, the best discoveries happen when you're having fun. Now, come on, the Hive Mind Collective has figured out how to do the wave across multiple dimensions. And the silicon-based beings have composed a symphony that actually teaches advanced calculus through interpretive jazz. As Zyrell followed her to the main chamber, now decorated with what Nora called motivational posters featuring quantum physics puns, he reflected on how much had changed. His final thought, recorded in the official testing center logs, summed up everything humanity had taught them. Perhaps the greatest test of intelligence isn't how well we can think on our own, but how well we can help others think better together. Though I still maintain that glitter, edible or otherwise, is not a necessary component of cognitive advancement, no matter what Representative Kip says about the power of sparkly thinking. The facility AI added its own observation to the log note. Humans continue to defy conventional logic by improving galactic cooperation through methods that seemingly violate multiple laws of physics and common sense. Current hypothesis. Their success may be directly proportional to their ability to make serious matters fun, and fun matters serious. Additional research needed, preferably with more cosmic cupcakes.